Part 23. You can hate my tyranny. This is our ancestors' domineering style. From that day on, Xuan Huaifeng accompanied Bai Xuelan to recuperate. He is elegant and handsome, but he has a little bit of infatuation since he was a child. He feels that eating the king's wealth and sharing the king's worries, since he is doing things for others. He should be serious and sincere. Even if you deal with a scoundrel like Bai Xuelan, you should abide by the principles. So, Bai Xuelan recuperates these days. Xuan Huaifeng is really sincere. Every day, he sits in the room and reads the original English novel with him for 2 or 3 hours. Bai Xuelan was afraid that he would be working too hard and hurt his throat. So he told him to stop every 2 quarters, surrounded the round table with each other, and drank some hot tea. Xuan Huaifeng often used this to explain the grammar structure in English to Bai Xuelan. Bai Xuelan laughed and called him Master Xuan. Occasionally, the two also chat about official affairs and customs, and gradually have a common topic. Especially in the ban on opium. There is something to talk about. Xuan Huaifeng was astonished, implying that things in life are unpredictable. He never thought that he could chat with Bai Xuelan. Later, Xuan Huaifeng agreed to Bai Xuelan, and he didn't go to the small dining room for 3 meals, so he brought it to Bai Xuelan's room, and the two of them sat and ate together. Bai Xuelan also had the same problem. He was spoiled by his family since he was a child. When he saw that Xuan Huaifeng was gentle with him, of course he was satisfied with his heart. So he tried to use all his strength. Even though he was gentle and kind, meticulous and considerate, even if he occasionally couldn't help showing his true nature, he laughed and saw Xuan Huaifeng. His face was wrong, and he immediately turned his head. I tried my best, and after a few days, I raised my friendship with Xuan Huaifeng's colleagues to a whole new level. Although Xuan Huaifeng didn't throw his arms around him, he didn't hide like he saw the plague spirit like before. Bai Xuelan was very satisfied with this. As soon as he was in a good mood, his wounds healed quickly. After a few days, he refused to lie in bed again. Xuan Huaifeng was entangled by him and had no choice but to accompany him around in the mansion. Fortunately, this mansion was originally converted into a palace of a king in the Qing Dynasty. The rockery and flowing water, the curved bridge and the secluded path are quite worth strolling and enjoying. When the two of them were strolling around for a while that day, and they were discussing the asymmetry of Qing dynasty architecture and the pros and cons of foreign architecture, the butler came over and said to them, "The doctor is here," and he said the routine re-examination of the chief's wound. Also, the bandage on the palm of Adjutant Xuan should also be removed. Xuan Huaifeng breathed a sigh of relief. It should have been removed, it's not a serious injury. It's been wrapped around all the time. These annoying things are very inconvenient. Bai Xuelan said, "You keep telling me to be careful about wounds, be careful about wounds. Why are your own wounds so careless?" Xuan Huaifeng retorted, "The wounds from bullets, how can it be compared with the injury caused by the glass piercing?" The two of them talked back and forth, and reached the door of the room. Dr. Xu and his assistant had been waiting inside, and they all stood up and said hello when they came. Bai Xuelan didn't let them check for him first. He pointed at Xuan Huaifeng and said to the doctor, "Let Adjutant Xuan look at the wound on his hand first. Be careful. Don't leave any scars." Xuan Huaifeng had to sit down and stretch out his hand honestly. When he took off the gauze, Bai Xuelan stood behind him and watched, with that gaze. Xuan Huaifeng's palm was numb. Vice President Xu walked around the White Mansion frequently, and knew a little about the importance of Xuan Huaifeng. He moved very carefully, lifted the gauze, looked at the wound, and smiled to announce the good news: recovered very well. When the scab falls off naturally, there shouldn't be any scars. Xuan Huaifeng looked at it for himself. And it was really good. The scabs had formed hard scabs in the places that had been cut before, and they had been carefully bandaged very light. Vice President Xu exhorted 2 words to pay attention to your diet, don't pick it up when it's itchy, and left 2 ointments for Xuan Huaifeng. But Bai Xuelan was very careful. He picked up the ointment and glanced at it. He also took out the small note of instructions inside. He browsed it like an expert and expressed his opinion, you don't need this. Of course, Vice President Xu didn't argue with the Chief of Customs, and nodded in agreement, that's right. Is there any good stuff in the chief's house? When it comes to the medicine for detoxification, it has always been said that there are secret recipes hidden in the Qing Palace. I don't know if it really happened. Bai Xuelan laughed and scolded. You old man, you are a thief. How do you know that I have the holy medicine of the Qing Palace in my hand? It took me a little bit of effort to get that thing. After talking and laughing, the next step is to examine the arm for the gunshot wound. At times like this, Bai Xuelan had to rush Xuan Huaifeng out, saying, it's blood and medicine, and it's very dirty. You'll vomit when you see it. Besides, I'm not used to being stared at the wound like this, there is a hole in the blood, it's ugly. Xuan Huaifeng didn't want to insist on staying, and was respectfully invited by the housekeeper to the next room. After waiting for about half an hour, the inspection over there was over. The housekeeper came again and asked Xuan Huaifeng to come over. Xuan Huaifeng entered the room, the doctor had already left, and Bai Xuelan was left lying on the bed alone. The wound was bandaged again, but he was in good spirits. Seeing him coming, Bai Xuelan beckoned him to come closer. Xuan Huaifeng walked over and asked him, what did the doctor say? Has the wound healed? Everything is fine. Bai Xuelan waited for him to get closer, grabbed his wrist again, and said softly, let me see. Look at your hands. Nothing to see. Let me see. I'm dying of heartache. Xuan Huaifeng was moved by what he said and was a little stunned for a while. After thinking about it, he loosened his 5-fingered fist and let him take it and take a closer look at his palm. Bai Xuelan looked at his right hand and asked for his left. Each sibling watched for 5 or 6 minutes. Do not hide, regret and sadness, all written on the face. Xuan Huaifeng was embarrassed on the contrary, and persuaded him, it's not a serious injury. So don't worry about it. Bai Xuelan barely listened before letting go of his hand and took out a beautifully colored jade box from under the pillow. Small. The round jade box lid is only the size of a thumb. This is said to be the medicine used by the empresses and concubines in the Qing Palace, even by the Lafayette 6C. If you rub it on the wound, it won't leave any traces. You sit down and I'll help you wipe it. Xuan Huaifeng has always why would you like to sit by Bai Xuelan's bed? But he was so sad just now, and if he refused, I'm afraid he would suspect that he was still holding grudges for this matter, and he would appear to be too stingy. Xuan Huaifeng sat down beside his bed. Bai Xuelan asked him to open both palms. Palms facing up, leaning on the unbandaged hand, unscrewing the lid of the box with one hand, revealing the crystal clear ointment inside. I don't know what the ointment is made of. Once the cap is opened, the scent is fragrant, and people can't help but feel a little smoky. Bai Xuelan hooked a little bit with his fingernails and smeared it on Xuan Huaifeng's palm, carefully rubbing it open with his fingertips. Xuan Huaifeng originally thought that he might get a scab, but it didn't happen at all. This man's movements were as light as a feather. And the pain was absolutely not painful, but the palm of his hand was a very sensitive place. It was a little itchy, but it was more difficult to calm down. He felt a little trembling in his wrist. He couldn't help shrinking back, but Bai Xuelan quickly grabbed him, glanced at him, and said in a low voice, "What are you doing?" I'm rubbing medicine for you. If you don't obey, you will have to when I'm recovering well, I won't listen to you anymore. While talking, he moved his body on the bed, and the whole person came over. Xuan Huaifeng approached him, his forehead almost touching his forehead. The hot face was filled with the familiar breath of Bai Xuelan. Xuan Huaifeng thought over and over again, he must hold on to it and not show his timidity. But this body seems to have long recalled the unbearable entanglements in the past, and all of them reacted automatically, thumping and jumping so wildly that Xuan Huaifeng was overwhelmed. In just a few minutes, it seemed like decades. He couldn't stand it any longer and wanted to pull his hand back embarrassingly. Where could Bai Xuelan let him shrink back, put his palms together, and hold his slender and fair fingers? Xuan Huaifeng asked, "What are you doing?" The voice was very light like an antique ink, just a drop, dripping into the gap in the tiny space between the two. In an instant, it disappeared without a trace. Huaifeng, Xuan Huaifeng. Bai Xuelan put his name on his lips, recited it several times, and sighed, "Don't let these thoughts of me." In the end, all melted into a gust of wind. And only the next word? Xuan Huaifeng felt a soreness in his chest. He hesitated for a while, then gritted his teeth and said, "If you keep talking nonsense like this, I won't be able to be this adjutant anymore." Bai Xuelan was full of tenderness. Looking at him, his eyes suddenly turned sharp, as if wishing to use his eyes to pierce two transparent holes in the heartless person in front of him. The room was suddenly cold and deadly. After a while, Bai Xuelan barely twisted his neck and looked away from Xuan Huaifeng's face. Xuan Huaifeng drew his hand again, but he did not stop it, and let go of his palm. Xuan Huaifeng took the opportunity to stand up from the bed. According to his usual practice, he should leave the room right now, but seeing Bai Xuelan silently, only looking out of the window with a different face, he felt very uncomfortable, and he couldn't make the decision to leave. He hesitated for a moment, but sat down again and sighed. "You have such a weird temper. I really don't know how to deal with you." Bai Xuelan thought he would run away, but he didn't expect him to stay. The heart that was so painful just now suddenly warmed up again. One person can control another person's state of mind in this way. Bai Xuelan also sighed and turned around. "My bad temper. I don't know how many people I have offended. Why don't I understand that after half my life, I have more grudges and few relationships? And one day I will do my own sins and can't live well." Xuan Huaifeng's face changed slightly. He stopped him and said, "It is common for people who are hurt to feel depressed. Why do you have to say such depressing words? This is the truth. The wine is drunk today." Bai Xuelan ignored it and said to himself, "Our Bai family, our ancestors were evil bandits. And the descendants turned over to pull a gang of soldiers and grabbed the territory, and they became warlords. I'm not like you. There is a mother who came from everyone. She has inherited a noble and scholarly style. This domineering in me is handed down from my ancestors. You can't understand it. You hate my tyranny. I understand it very well. If I am in power, I will keep you for one day. If you stay with me, I will be happy for one day. When I lose, I have no ability to stop you. You can go with others." Speaking of the back, unconsciously True touched the sad. There was a stubborn sneer on his face, but a drop of hot tears could not be hidden, and a slight tremor hung in the corner of his eyes. Eyelids flickered and fell down in shock. When Xuan Huaifeng saw this scene, it was as if someone had slashed a big hole in his heart, paralyzing the pain. He reached out his hand subconsciously, wanting to wipe Bai Xuelan's tears, but when he got to the front, he realized that he didn't even have a handkerchief, so it seemed inappropriate to just touch his cheek directly. Fingertips stopped in midair. Bai Xuelan just lowered his head. On the well-proportioned nails, there is a touch of water, a very reverent kiss. Like something. It poured out on the little fingertips. Light as a feather and as heavy as a mountain. Xuan Huaifeng suddenly lost his mind, and after a few seconds of infatuation, he took a long breath. And then retracted the hand that seemed to no longer belong to him. You. As soon as he said a word, a knock on the door suddenly sounded. The two people who were immersed in this moment were completely awakened. Who? Chief, Mrs. Nian is here, saying she wants to see Adjutant Xuan. Xuan Huaifeng was just waking up from a big dream. And was sorting out his ups and downs. When he heard his sister's arrival, his heartbeat became even more chaotic. He couldn't help looking at Bai Xuelan. Bai Xuelan pondered for a moment. She probably misses you. Go ahead and sit with her. If she is happy, you can leave her to eat at the mansion. Xuan Huaifeng agreed, for fear that his sister would wait, so he hurriedly went. Xuan Huaifeng came out from Bai Xuelan and went straight to the flower hall. When I got to the door, I heard a man talking inside, and I couldn't help but stop by the door. Dorman takes care of you, you should go to the mansion to ask for your piece. A woman in the house immediately laughed, it's not appropriate to ask for peace. However, I've been fascinated by the drama these days, and I just want to ask you to tell me about the drama. Well, if you agree, that would be great. It was his sister's voice. Xuan Huaifeng walked in curiously, and saw that Xuan Dian was sitting at the small round table, writing something with her head down. And it was Bai Yunfei who was sitting on another chair chatting with her. Bai Yunfei was very cautious. When he entered the mansion of the chief of customs, he was very polite everywhere. As soon as he saw Xuan Huaifeng, he immediately stood up and said with a smile, Adjutant Xuan, I'm bothering you. He was wearing a green serge robe. It is not easy for ordinary people to dress well in this color, but he is fair-skinned and tall, and wearing this suit makes him look more slender and delicate. The tone and demeanor of greetings also revealed a graceful and elegant style that is hard to match for ordinary people. Bai Xuelan said that he was a descendant of aristocrats. But it was really like that. Seeing him, Xuan Huaifeng inevitably remembered the gossip that Bai Xuelan had said. He didn't know what it was like, so he couldn't help but glanced at his wrist. But Bai Yunfei lowered his hand, covering his wrist with wide-necked long sleeves. What? Can't see either. He had no choice but to smile at Bai Yunfei, Boss Pai. It's rare for you to come to the door. If you're too far away, please sit down. With a gesture, he asked Bai Yunfei to sit down. I called my sister again. Xuan Dian was writing something on the paper with a pen and only lowered her head in response. Seeing that she was busy, Xuan Huaifeng sat down to chat with Bai Yunfei first. Also called the footman to bring hot tea and snacks. After chatting for a while, Xuan Dian had finished the work. She wrote Nian's house's phone number and address on a fragrant letterhead. And she a little twinkling handed it to Bai Yunfei and said, if you promise to tell me the drama, don't make excuses. If you don't come, I'll be happy for nothing. Bai Yunfei hurriedly put his hands together. If anything, this is Mrs. Nian's admiration. And there is absolutely no reason to refuse. Xuan Dian treated him very kindly and said a few words to him to be polite. She turned around and said to Xuan Huaifeng, I haven't seen you for a few days, why don't you see me? Xuan Huaifeng said, I have a lot of things going on recently, so I don't have time. I'll come over in a few days when I'm free. Taking a look at Xuan Dian and Bai Yunfei, he couldn't help asking, by the way. Why did you two come together? We just hit it. Xuan Dian flicked her peony red painted fingernails on her sash jacket, her eyes flickering from Bai Yunfei, who was sitting upright. The car drove to the gate of the mansion and saw Boss Pai. I also got off the rickshaw. You said, is it a coincidence? Obviously, she was very happy with this chance encounter with Bai Yunfei. Xuan Huaifeng knew that her sister was fascinated by Bai Yunfei's dramas, but it was her sister's freedom to watch them cutely. He said generously, I came here today. First, I would like to say goodbye to Chief Pai. I often have him to help me on weekdays. I haven't seen him these days. I heard that I feel a little uncomfortable, so come and say hello. Bai Xuelan ordered the outside to block the news. But there is no airtight wall in the world. In the past few days, some gossip is expected. Xuan Huaifeng said lightly, the chief just approved the official documents until late at night. He feels a little cold. And he will be fine after a few days of rest. Bai Yunfei said with a little reassurance, it turned out to be a cold, then I am relieved. He asked, can I see the chief? Xuan Huaifeng knew that because Bai Xuelan was wearing bandages, he could hardly see outsiders, so he politely declined. Next time, Bai Yunfei thought about what I wanted to see, and said to Xuan Huaifeng, there is one more thing. I will write a new book in Tianyan Garden the day after tomorrow and sing, The Soul of Pearflower. I don't know if Chief Pai and Adjutant Xuan will be free to listen. Xuan Huaifeng realized that he was here to find someone to join him. As long as you are an actor, who doesn't want to find a few rich people to support them? And every time a new drama is released, a few important guests have to say hello everywhere, which is also common sense. But a talent like Bai Yunfei made it difficult to treat him and ordinary actors for a while, so he was a little surprised. Xuan Huaifeng sighed in his heart, but instead felt a little sympathetic to Bai Yunfei, and said cheerfully, the chief is still recovering, I can't say for sure. Let's take a look. Xuan Dian said, yeah, and gave Xuan Huaifeng an angry look. Huaifeng, you really are. People are kind enough to invite you. I think there is no conflict between recuperating from illness and listening to dramas. Listening to a good drama, if you are in a good mood. Wouldn't your illness get better faster? Bai Yunfei didn't want to make people embarrassed, and said hurriedly, if the chief is not interested, Yunfei would not dare to force it. After all, recuperation is a serious matter. Let's just ask Adjutant Xuan. Let me tell you, I will keep the room of Tianyan Garden for Chief Pai. If he is in a good mood, he will come and listen. Is it possible to reserve a room? Bai Yunfei said. Mrs. Nian is always there, and Yunfei is flattered. The room will be reserved for you. Thank you then. What do you say, it should be me. Thank you very much. Bai Yunfei obviously didn't want to stay for long. As he said, he stood up and said goodbye to Xuan Huaifeng. Chief Pai is recovering from illness. And Deputy Xuan must be busier than usual, so I won't disturb it. Xuan Huaifeng stood up and sent out the flower hall, went down the steps, and politely said, why do you just sit for a while? It's not too late to talk. Bai Yunfei said, there are really other things. After the White Mansion is here, I have to go to the Lin Mansion. Xuan Huaifeng was stunned for a moment. He took a deep breath, only to feel his face stiff, forced himself to calmly said, yes. Qijun also often praises the boss, and he must watch this new play. Does he even want you to come over and invite him? Bai Yunfei shook his head with a wry smile. It's good, he's going. This book is new. He came to my house to see how many games I've practiced. And he likes it very much. But something happened a few days ago, and people are still lying down in bed. It looks like he won't be able to get out the day after tomorrow. I think he can look up to him, and we have made good friends with each other, so I visit every time I have time. Xuan Huaifeng said in shock, what? Did something happen to him? Bai Yunfei frowned and said, the specific process, he can't explain clearly. It seems that he took a car to the outside of the city a few days ago and was kidnapped by a few bandits. Fortunately, the bandits didn't pay attention and let him take a look. When he was empty, he loosened the rope and escaped from the field barefooted by himself. Although he came back, he was frightened and cold, and became ill. Now, he asks a German doctor to see a doctor for injections every day. Xuan Huaifeng's heart twitched when he heard it. Qijun is also a young master from everyone. He can't lift his shoulders or lift his hands. It is really dangerous to meet a gangster. Such a big thing, he didn't even know about it. He was miserable in bed. But Bai Yunfei went to his bed to comfort him. The more I think about it, the more uncomfortable it becomes. Seeing that his face had changed color, Bai Yunfei seemed a little excited. And persuaded him, Adjutant Xuan, don't worry too much, after all, it's just a false alarm. And now the world is not peaceful everywhere, so you can come back without any danger. It is the great fortune of misfortune. I went to see him yesterday, and he is much better. In 3 or 4 days, he will probably be able to get out of bed and walk around. He comforted Xuan Huaifeng and said, by the way, you are also an old classmate. Is there anything you want me to bring to him? Xuan Huaifeng felt as if he had suffered a sour thorn in his heart. I thought to myself, how can I let you bring him to my words with him? Xuan Huaifeng shook his head and said, don't bother you anymore. When I'm free, I'll visit him in person. He absently sent Bai Yunfei away, but when he returned, he couldn't hold back at all.